Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be in the world with all the craziness that is going on. We are happy to have you here. Welcome to Criticality Live, sponsored by Secure Nation, where we take the assumptions that everyone has, challenge them, cut through the noise, and talk honestly about all the things in cybersecurity. So, first off, Kayla, what have you been doing the last week?
Oh, everything feels like such a blur. But last week I did the AWS Accelerator program in New York City, so that was a blast. Getting to go into the big city. I mean, I live in Boston, but New York obviously is just a different animal entirely. And this week I'm just making plans. I'm going to DC tomorrow. I'm attending for the fourth year the Institute for Critical Infrastructure and Technology. They have an annual black tie gala that was supposed to be in November, but with the government shutdown, it got pushed out. So I am prepping for that. Oh, I just hit my knee. I'm prepping to go to that. But then I realized that this is a very girl problem. I don't have a dress to wear. So I have to
The
go downstairs.
horror, the
I know.
horror.
And I'm like, I don't want to repeat a dress for such a fancy event because it's like, like a gala type thing. So, what about you?
Um, I've been really enjoying some time off between, school ending, teaching classes in December. I start my doctorate in cybersecurity in February, so I'm taking some time off in between just to relax, recover, and be prepared for the next 2 years of absolute insanity of trying to put together a doctoral thesis. So that is always going to be fun.
Wow. That's amazing. You never slow down. It's just incredible. And I'm like super proud of you. And I'm sure everybody else is too for going for your doctorate.
Hey, I have to keep busy because otherwise I'd go completely insane. For anybody that
Fair
knows
enough.
me, I'm one of those people that, when I take vacation, I start climbing the walls after about 2 days where I need to do
Yeah.
something constructive. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that is indeed how things work for me.
Yeah. I get it. I'm the same way. So, yeah.
All right. Well, enough of us doing some little chit chat. Let's get to the real reason why everyone else is here. Our guest today is someone who has been shaping conversations around cybersecurity for a really long time and is one of my personal daily reads for LinkedIn cybersecurity things. He's not a product evangelist, he's not a framework collector. He is a true signal hunter. Bob Carver has spent decades building large scale threat monitoring, botnet detection programs across some of the most complex environments in North America. While the industry chases dashboards and buzzwords and the new shiny thing from RSA or Black Hat, Bob chases the truth deep into telemetry and where attackers can't hide. He's a leader who's been believes that judgment can't be automated, that culture beats tools every single time, and that the real work of cybersecurity happens long before a breach makes the headlines. If you ever wondered what modern threat hunting really looks like, this should be a great conversation for you to tune into because it looks well beyond the slideware that we see every day in the conferences. So, welcome,
Yes.
Bob, and we're happy to have you here.
Yes. This session is going to be really key for a lot of these small companies, I think, that don't really understand what threat hunting means. It doesn't have the ability to actually do it themselves at the large scales that we hear about from some of these organizations that actually have these threat hunting labs and have the hand-on work. So I really feel like for folks that are listening out there, if you have any questions as we're going through this about your own programs and things like that, please feel free to add them in and we'll try to get to them when we can. I think Bob is just going to be another moment. Um, oh, wait, I think we actually have him. Never mind. Great. Hi, Bob. Oh, you know, gotta
Uh,
love technology when it works and when
you
it
know it
doesn't.
works. The bits and bytes
uh,
keep hitting and biting.
yes, absolutely. It's
So, one of the things that Bob is an expert in is botnets. And that's
mhm.
something that we hear a lot about, but not a lot of people can really explain what botnets are. Kayla, do you want to tell me what you think a botnet is?
Whenever I think of a botnet, I think probably what the vast majority of people think of is you know those news headline, like those stories you see on the news where they have the bot farms with all those cell phones that are stuck up on a wall with all the different screens and just it's to me it's a computer fighting a computer, AI versus AI. You don't really know if you're actually arguing with the person or if a bot knows it's arguing with another bot. I don't know if they know, but that's what I think of when I think of these types of things, and that is purely based off of the fictional movies that we see, the sci-fi movies, combined with some of the news coverage that we've seen of some of those bot farms. So to me, it's an amalgamation of both, I guess. But I don't. You're right. I don't know much more than that.
And you're not far off. Botnets can be, what we've seen taken down in New York with the massive amounts of laptops and cell phones that are mimicking real people.
Mm-hmm.
But they can also be distributed where you don't even know that your machine is part of a bot network and it's doing all this malicious stuff in the background. So it'll be very interesting when we get Bob in and he can talk to what he's seeing in that space and how it's evolved over the last decade or so. Because I
Yeah.
know when I first came in, botnets were, big nation state things where, they compromise systems and you don't know where a thing is. And attribution to an attack via botnet is extremely hard because just because I can trace the IP back to some place in the Philippines doesn't mean that the actual attackers in the Philippines. It just means that the box that they're using happens to have a Philippines IP address.
Yep. Yeah. I see Bob keeps trying to come in. I don't know if it's a uh, security camera botnet. Yeah.
I mean, we do have security cameras everywhere all the time. And we've seen where China's using, their essentially botnet of cameras to do social rating, where
Mm.
based on your behavior, you get a score. We're seeing all kinds of cool things. My wife and I, we have a virtual window in our living room. We built a TV, have it all framed out, have curtains around it, and we put
Oh.
very live feeds around the world on it right now because it's Mardi Gras season here in Louisiana. We have
Oh, great.
a live stream from Bourbon Street, and
Oh.
you actually see people walking through Bourbon Street and got their hand grenades and all that good stuff.
Wow.
And but that's what you can be doing with these kinds of things is just really tons of information everywhere.
That's actually pretty cool. I didn't realize that people did that, the virtual window. I like that. That's different. Oh, I'd like to have like a virtual window overlooking like a countryside or like an ocean, something, well, a calm ocean.
Yeah.
Have it right behind my laptop or something so I can just kind of drift off and try to lower my blood pressure on the days.
Yeah.
It's lowering.
We did it over, I think, Thanksgiving timeframe is when we installed it, and we've done themes. For Christmas time, we had like snow in the background because obviously we live in Louisiana, and on Christmas Day it was like 70 when I
Oh,
was out deep frying turkeys. So snow is not something we get here, but we were both raised in the Northeast, so we definitely enjoy the look of snow, just not the reality of snow and how that works. So
yeah,
when the six rolled around and hit Mardi Gras season down here, we put some Bourbon Street on there. We're gonna figure out how we're gonna do themes for each
that's
holiday and
great.
the window reflect, what that is.
Wow, that's wonderful. Hey, Bob, can you hear us? Can you hear anything, Josh?
I don't hear or see anything.
Oh, lost him again. See, tech, it's great when it works, but awful when it doesn't.
Yeah. Um, but for those who have not read Bob's commentary, like me, he posts pretty much every day on LinkedIn, and he is literally one of the first people I look at their stuff first thing in the morning because he's got some really interesting, deep technical takes on things that are going on globally. So it's very interesting to have someone who is a well-known thought leader in the space that's doing real deep technical dives into some really niche areas, particularly around all things threat. And that's an area that we like to use buzzwords around threat intelligence and all that stuff, but do we really do threat intelligence? Do we really do threat analysis,
Mhm.
or are we doing just, you know, things that make it look and sound like we're doing those things? So we're just pulling in, indicators of compromise without understanding, do they apply, or am I getting tons of trash alerts because they're
Mhm.
not tied back to what we're doing? And how does threat hunting really work in your environment?
Yeah. Do you have like the source? Is it a newsletter that he sends out every morning that goes to emails and on LinkedIn?
Yeah, it's just his LinkedIn profile. He posts something pretty much
Oh, okay.
every day at some point over the course of the day. Um, Absolutely fabulous content. One of the folks that I, when I log in the morning, I immediately go to, Bob's profile and see what's going on, along with some of our previous guests like Will
Mhm. Yep.
Kowalski, Mike Miller, you know, obviously my good friend Chris Roberts. He's always got some really good stuff posted up. So these are folks that I truly look to for seeing what's out there in the field.
Yeah, that's great because for me, when I was doing from the GRC perspective, when I would do the threat and vulnerability assessment, so not the technical side, it was really just kind of taking a look at the in-scope systems and then going through and pulling from a threat feed some of the latest or OWASP, MITRE, things like that, and then mapping
Right.
across and saying, would this be impacted, yes or no? And then taking that yes or no, those responses, and then if it was yes, comparing it back to a different risk. This, of course, this was back when things were manual. Everything was in Excel. So comparing it back and then kind of looking across the control landscape and say, okay, would this really be a high critical exposure, or is it really just maybe a moderate or a low, depending on that the way that the ecosystem was set up and the control effectiveness. Where I think the conversation that we're going to get into in a little bit, once we can sort out what's happening with the cameras, will be a bit more on that technical side. And we can take a look at understanding, how do you get your hands dirty from that perspective, which is all really new and interesting to me to sit there and to learn about. Um, I haven't had that hands-on
Right.
exposure as Bob has. So
Although I have to laugh at your optimism that we are not still doing all these things manually for the
no,
vast
yeah,
majority of
yeah,
organizations.
yes, it's true. Yes, threat and vulnerability assessments and threat hunting. It's come a long way, but it's also as is anything with, I think, the security, like cybersecurity landscape, is you always hark back to like what you're comfortable with doing as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
not only comfortable, it's what can I afford to do? You know,
Yes.
there are a
Very true.
lot of really, really great tools that do a lot of great automation, but how much of my total company budget am I able to dedicate to IT and cybersecurity? And
Hmm.
how much of that larger IT
Yeah.
operations budget am I going to dump into cybersecurity? How much time and personnel do I have to do legitimate threat hunting?
Right.
How can I do automations in ways that make sense, but also are within my budget? Because ultimately, that's the line item that a lot of us that are practitioners,
Yeah.
you know, CISOs or just leaders in the space have to juggle is there's a tool that solves my problem,
Yep.
but it's, $100 a head. I can't
Yeah.
afford $100 a head a year on top of what I'm already spending for my regular stuff.
Yeah. And I feel that a piece of the puzzle that has always been very challenging for me to understand fully is, where does your MSSP partner come into play when it comes to threat hunting? What are their direct obligations with their tool sets? Obviously, it'll be contractually
Yeah.
delegated as well, but what do they, I guess, have from a a tool set perspective, how does that then impact the maturity of your own program? Because obviously third party dependencies can be a little bit wishy-washy sometimes. And then, do you trust all of those things? Like I said, it's like a huge ecosystem that really is intertwined completely around your risk profile. And you can't be an expert in everything, clearly. But this is one of those, threat hunting, understanding like botnets, AI versus, the human behind the keyboard. What does this all kind of look like from that top down, bottom up perspective, if that makes sense?
And it's interesting that you bring up MSSPs because they are in a very unique position to have kind of a larger view of what's going on in an environment. Particularly, they have clients that are in multiple clients in the same sector and then multiple sectors, because you can take some step back and look at it from like that 10,000 foot view at the data that they have and start making correlations between things of going, all right, I have a client that is in the hospitality industry and we just seen them get hit by this particular ransomware group. And now I can go back, scale up a little bit, and then look over at my other hospitalities and go, well, if they hit this, that's probably their target, to use the business terms, their ICP, their ideal customer profile of we're going after hospitalities because they're using similar systems or using similar tool sets, and they're probably going to have similar levels of either protection or lack of protection.
Right.
And go, okay, I've seen this here. Now I can be proactive and do threat hunting in other areas because I've seen this in this environment, rather than, if I'm sitting just as a SOC inside of a company, I'm really only going to see what's in my company or what I'm getting from a information sharing ISAC that I'm a member of, or what I'm pulling out through either, RSS feeds, Google, KVs, all those kind of things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like the MSSP side, having the ability to catch trends and to see things because they have all this data, right? Like that from different verticals with their clients and different tactics and techniques. They can take all that data that they're seeing and they're able to give those better insights, I think, for the companies that really don't have the capability in-house to do it. So I didn't really think about it from that perspective, but that is a good point. It's really interesting to me that some of these data sources, these data feeds, MSSPs, catch things and others don't. So it's like, what are they doing differently in this particular instance that others aren't? And how do we all share that information to become better? Because I remember when Log4j happened, that was before I became a CISO. And I called a friend of mine who's a senior director of a SOC for a very large insurance company. Oh, hey,
finally.
Hey, Bob.
So sorry. I don't know. The internet gods didn't want me to come on right away. I don't know what the heck was going on, but anyway, I'm here finally.
Well, first, thanks for working through the internet gremlins, because we all know those can be a bit tenacious.
Yeah.
Super happy to have you on.
Hey, happy to be here.
Thank you, Bob, for your time. We appreciate it.
Oh, you bet. So you're talking about Mirai and some other things, I guess?
We were just having a chat, a conversation. So these are some of the folks that are listening that were asking some questions. But yeah, if there's anything that you have to say on it, please.
Oh, well, I can tell you, I was indirectly involved with a lot of that. The Mirai botnet probably should be a case study in most cybersecurity university courses right now. I mean, geez, it was like, I don't quote me, but it seemed like it was well over, definitely over 100,000 of bots that were part of that. One of the biggest one was a Sierra Wireless cards that were being used, and they had a vulnerability, and they definitely took advantage of it. And boy, they caused a lot of DDoS issues across the world. It was mainly in the US, but I think parts of the EU and the UK got hit pretty hard too. So, one of the difficulties is, they were able to identify a lot of the bots and even actually identify who owned the hardware that was part of that, the customers.
Oh.
And a lot of them, I think, because they had little or no IT or cyber people, they just sort of were deer in headlights and refused to update the firmware to be able to make it so they wouldn't be vulnerable anymore. So anyway, it was rough. It's rough. And the thing is, think about it. I mean, you're talking about water utilities and all sorts of other different remote access type software and hardware that's related to that. And the people that they hire, a lot of times hire contractors to put it in. And then once it's in and it works, it's like, well, everything's fine. What, what do you want us to do? It works.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what made that one, what I think is especially insidious, is they went after IoT devices that are typically not managed the same way that we manage traditional IT devices. They're usually I install it and then I forget about anything to do with it unless it breaks.
Exactly. And they did, like what you said, they had some DVRs and that sort of thing, and some camera recording equipment and that sort of thing. But I think the Sierra Wireless was one of the largest ones. And the Sierra, they were able to get Sierra Wireless to roll out a patch, a firmware patch. And that took some doing to do that. But then to communicate to thousands, if not probably tens of thousands, if not more, people, was a major project all by itself. And then to get them to respond, because again, a lot of times, you're dealing with little small mom and pops or small municipals, and they might not have a full-time IT guy. And most of them definitely don't have a full-time cyber guy or girl. Woman. So anyway, it was a difficult situation. But that's the issue with IoT devices in general, as you guys know. It's a lot of times, maybe us on the screen here, we would try to update all of our IoT devices and everything that we have connected to the internet. But a lot of people, it's a set and forget it. Once it's up and running, it's like, okay, all is fine with the world.
Yeah, it's really fun to say that. I did a quarterly cybersecurity training for a company. I went into that for them. And one of the things I mentioned, we were talking about home security.
Yes.
And I was like, your router should be no less than, you shouldn't be any older than 5 years old, excuse me. And I got a phone call after, oh my gosh, I haven't touched a home router in 15 years. It's been here since I moved into the house. I was like,
oh no.
But it's that set it and forget it though, right? Like, and I was my husband is a plumber, so this is a very different language to him. And I was explaining to him, like, I can see how that can happen. Mine is underneath my desk, and I don't, unless I kick it. I don't know it's there.
Sure.
So gave the please call Verizon or Xfinity, whatever it might be.
Exactly. Well, I had a situation with, and it was an ISP router, and it was actually an employee at the company where I worked. And what happened is all of a sudden the DNS settings were hijacked. And it was changed over to, this was before the Ukraine-Russia war, but it was Ukraine DNS server. And it was changing some of the routing. And I got on the phone with the ISP and sort of said, hey, you have a problem here. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, do you realize that I oversee well over 100 million customers? And
oh my gosh.
And I see everything, and you'd have a problem. And so they would not acknowledge it for the longest time. And then maybe it took over a year or two later, they finally decided, oh, we better get rid of those routers. They're not any good. And it's interesting how, people just don't want to, put their head in the sand like an ostrich, and they don't want to own up to these type of things. But what we ended up having to do is we ended up I did. I just told the employee, I said, you need to talk to the customer support and just verify how to do a complete reset for the router, so everything's base, firmware and all that. And he did, and thing was fine for a while. But again, I think it was within 12 to 24 months, all of a sudden that ISP said, "Oh, guess what? We have all brand new routers now." but it's like,
golly gee, why did that happen?
Yeah, and it's like, we don't have any problem. Our stuff doesn't stink.
Yeah. That sounds
And it's like, but I've had the same thing happen with a lot of things like that. I mean, you get a guy that's a sysadmin. He says, "I've been doing this for 25 years and I never been hacked." And it's like, well, here's the packet capture. Here, your phone at home, you're reporting to duty, your new bot, that's your server. And I said, yes, you're going to have to reimage it. I don't think you're going to, this is good enough stuff that it's probably not going to clean it up. So anyway.
We see that a lot of folks who equate longevity in the field with technical acumen in the field, and those are very different things.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt, unfortunately. But anyway, lots of fun and games, and that's things like Mirai. I mean, that's one of the things I'm still concerned about, that because of the I don't know if we're already there, but I mean, there's probably more IoT devices than people in the US right now. And it's, almost true in other countries too. So it's a little concerning.
Yeah, I feel like the technical piece of the IoT is always such a black box for folks, especially like, oh, I just want a smart device. Yeah. What does that actually really mean, having a smart device in your home, other than, turning on lights and ordering things by voice? Like, what is it exposing you to? And it is something that's not really discussed outside of our circles, right? I think everyone on this online now, and all three of us understand the complexities there, but trying to explain it to my neighbors or my friends and family, I'm like, do you understand that this is a way in now? And that's a very So.
I had an interesting thing with my parents. My parents had it was a cable modem, and there was back in the day where there's no firewall. There was a period of time where the cable modems had absolutely no firewall, and you had to have a firewall, either a software firewall or put in something in between. And anyway, the ISP changed. I had a router in between, and they were connecting fine and everything. And anyway, he disconnected the router, and it was acting as the firewall. And then, of course, my parents' computer got compromised. And they were pretty much set on Windows like a lot of people. And it was the worst nightmare I've ever seen. I mean, it seemed like 100 infections at least.
Oh, geez.
And also, it was interesting. They say that one of the things that they did, they were sharing stories between friends, and there were attachments in those stories in the emails, and and a lot of them were, oh, this person was a great World War II hero, and he did all these great things, but yet there was malware embedded in there somewhere. And they would share different things like that would be of interest to this certain age category, and they would just keep on sharing it between it started out tens of people, then hundreds of people, then probably thousands of people across the United States. It was interesting. And I remember telling my folks, I said, whatever you do, because this was back when you could have a DVD to reload your software. And I said, whatever you do, don't lose this DVD. You're going to need it. You might need it one day.
Yep.
Well, they threw it out. They didn't. You don't know what this is for. Even though I said, do not ever get rid of this. They threw it out, and I spent 14 hours straight trying to clean up their system. And I said, you know what? I said, I've got 99+% of this thing cleaned up, but there may be some stuff embedded so deep that I can't fix it without breaking the entire, operating system. And I said, just don't do any online purchasing with this. And it's like, okay. But another time, what happened is they had some problems with their printer working, and that's what happened. I remember, because we had the software firewall I had in there on their system. Anyway, the guy turned down their firewall entirely so their printer would work again. And that's when they had the cable modems that had no firewall. And my dad tipped the guy $20, and I said, don't have that guy touch your computer again. It's just
oh no.
He compromised it big time. And of course, they didn't know any different. It's like, well, the printer works. Oh well, what do you do?
So Bob, you're known as kind of like the botnet guy.
Yeah.
And you monitor global botnets.
Yeah.
What's the most surprising thing that you've learned on how do they evolve and how do they persist in environments?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I'm almost at a point where I'm not sure if very many things surprise me anymore. I mean, for example, there was a period of time, the early LinkedIn days. LinkedIn was in the early days, and I think I'm pretty sure it was Reid Hoffman that reached out to me. But anyway, they were serving up malware. It was via JavaScript drive-by. When you went to log in, I just said, hey, you guys, you realize you're serving up malware? And I think it's probably a JavaScript. And after I notified them several times of similar things, they said, well, would you like to be on our advisory board? And I said, well, I'm actually starting up Verizon Wireless incident response and monitoring team with almost no people for millions of people. And I said, anyway, I just didn't have the time. I was working night and day trying to get that going. But so that was just, I think we're seeing a little less drive-by now, but then also just people downloading things from the internet, whether it be browser extensions or maybe utilities or something, and they just go out and try to get it. And I know that was a problem, I think, in a lot of businesses for a while. I mean, for example, a lot of people would need PuTTY to log into different systems. They wanted PuTTY. And they would just go Google PuTTY, and of course, a lot of those Google links were bad versions of PuTTY that had embedded malware. So that was a big thing for a while. But I've seen cases where so-called legitimate software. I mean, you could take the software and upload it to VirusTotal, and everything. Oh, it's all fine. Everything's good. Well, what that VirusTotal didn't tell you, that somewhere down the line, after weeks or months or whatever, it would go out and have a back door, open up a back door, and say, "Hey guys, bring the troops in, the malware troops, pen testing software and that sort of thing." So I've seen multiple cases of that. And the other thing, I've seen, it's probably more nation state, where they've actually taken over the digital certificates and stolen legitimate digital certificates from big name players that, you can imagine who those might consist of. And so again, a simple VirusTotal thing wouldn't tell you anything. I've opened up, I was able to pop open some software that was a VoIP software, voice over IP. So people say, "Oh, I can talk to all my relatives all over the world." Isn't this great? And you pop open that software and code, and see there's a sleep cycle in there. And there was one in that VoIP software that had a sleep cycle of 6 months. But then after that, there was a HTTP GET to go out and download malware after 6 months. So everything's good. Everything is clean for 6 months. But then I've seen some that was clean for maybe a few days, and then it started downloading. And anyway, those are one of the things I'm concerned that I've seen in the past. But the one I'm seeing now that I'm concerned with is all the ones associated with the LLMs and the AI systems. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be one of my questions, how should organizations prepare themselves for this AI-driven adversaries, without getting trapped in what I like to call like the vendor hype, the marketing, the buzzword bingo.
Sure.
Do you have any tips, tricks, suggestions?
Probably, I recommend downloading US-based systems and run it locally for now. I don't think the vast majority of people do not realize the depth and the breadth of the vulnerabilities that are involved with this. I mean, it's almost like playing, before we could, in threat intel, you're playing on a 2D field. Now we're almost playing on a 3D field. I mean, that level of complexity. And a lot of times you can't see what's going on. I can tell you for a fact that 2 of the well-known LLMs out there, there was times where info-stealer domains popped their ugly head up in my session. And luckily my stack caught them. And I'm wondering how many times did my stack not catch them. And those were the known ones. And there's so much unknown ones that anyway, I have a friend that's a pen tester, and he was just concentrating just on the MCPs, sort of the middleware of all these AI systems. And this was over a year ago. He had over 500 vulnerabilities calculated. Over 500.
Wow.
I haven't talked to him recently, and I have to hit him up specifically, but I'm sure he has well over 1,000 vulnerabilities calculated in these MCPs that are out there. And that's just only one part of the ecosystem of these AI systems. So, I mean, there's the data poisoning that can go on. There's all sorts of. Anyway, I did a mini video on it on LinkedIn last year, I think, and talked about just some of the basic ways that these things can be compromised. But then people can be compromised, and if you got anything of sensitivity, forget it. It may be gone.
So let's pull on that string a little bit.
Sure.
What's the biggest, in your opinion, misconception that we have about botnets in 2026?
Gosh, misconception. Well, I think there's probably more out there than people know. That's one thing. I mean, when I was doing that sort of work, I was monitoring between 100 and 150 major botnets across the world. So, and those were just the major ones, a lot of times there can be small ones, maybe a few hundred or something, that maybe would not reach the, visibility of most people's awareness. So, and it can be done in many different ways. I mean, well, one of the things I think there's less, at least last when I had more visibility into it, is less botnets connected to the phones. I think phones, you'd see more like spyware and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, and actually there were times where I would see spyware where somebody would, put spyware on either their kid's phone or significant other's phone without their knowledge.
Yeah.
To be able to see what's going on. And that was sort of scary, but you know, we really didn't have the legal wherewithal to even report that sort of thing, you know, because you know, a lot of times it was involved with families and stuff. But yeah, so but most botnets that I saw too were PCs. And occasionally, yeah, usually Windows PCs, especially Windows PCs if they were one version old, like a Windows 10. I don't have the visibility like I used to, but I would think that there's probably a lot of Windows 10 PCs that are part of botnets right now, as we're speaking. But the IoT devices would sort of ebb and flow. They would like the Mirai type, and there has been some other Mirai cousins that have come and gone from time to time too. And the scary thing is they might come back again at any time, especially if there's a lot of IoT devices that haven't been updated, like we talked about.
Yeah. So for folks that are out there that are worried about this, you know, do you have any idea of, or at least in your opinion, what's the most underrated signal for detecting unknown threats right now?
Yeah. I think if it's just general consumers, maybe putting on a bi-directional firewall. So because especially if it's one where you set it up where it has to approve every outgoing and ingoing packet, that's probably a good indicator of what's going on. And then tying that back to a process too. And that's one of the things I came up with the whole concept of XDR over a good decade ago, at least. I actually handed on a silver platter to was it Black Trace? Is it Dark Trace? Dark Trace?
Yep.
Yeah, in the UK. I met them. I was speaking at a couple of different conferences, and I said, "Hey guys, this is what I want. Can you do it?" And they actually sat on it for quite some time. It got back to some of the developers, I guess you could say, engineers, that sort of thing. And there was two spin-offs from Dark Trace that happened. They were small. They were unfortunately very underfunded. But they started to give it and they reached out to me when they started to have something in place. But I think we're going to need to see more and more that sort of thing. You know, deep visibility into data flows on the network, but correlating those to the endpoints too, and the processes of the endpoints. I mean, that's what I used to do in a manual basis, but I wanted to have that happen on a more automated basis. And ultimately, you know, you get machine learning and neural networks and that, you know, and more advanced type AI involved to be able to
definitely
do those.
So you are a preeminent leader in this field. So let's take a step back and think, what really drew you into this field? You know, what turned just curiosity into a commitment for it? You know, before there was the titles and all the certifications, what was that very first spark for you that kind of hit you and went, this is what I want to do. This is what I want my career to be.
Gotcha. I've redeveloped myself several times in my career. I used to manage commercial real estate properties, and at the peak, I managed today's dollars. It would be easily 6 to 8 billion with a B.
Wow.
Worth of commercial real estate properties. But I got tired of the boom. It was boom and bust. And you know, if you did a good job, you eventually worked yourself out of a job. If you did a bad job, you would still not have a job. So it doesn't matter. So I actually had a chance to go back to grad school, and I did, and got a degree in information systems. Started working for Fidelity Investments, did system admin, and also did a lot of network monitoring. What's going on, not only the endpoints and making sure they had enough memory and CPU, but also the bandwidth on the networks. But what happened is when there were worms that came out during like the early 2000s, I think. Yeah, early 2000s. And I had all this visibility into monitoring network traffic. And what I was able to do back then too, there was not that many security people at the early 2000, like 2000. So what happened is these worms would happen, and all of a sudden I say, oh, I have visibility into the network. Let's see if we can figure out what's going on with these worms. And they would light up like a Christmas tree, and you could see where, usually it was a single port, and you could see all the traffic going back and forth. So then I would report back to the people that managed all the network PCs and that sort of thing. And then we'd have to take those out one by one, take them off the network because they were compromised with those different worms. So it's like, whoa, this is, there's something to this. And so actually I started volunteering at Fidelity Investments for different security projects because, again, they didn't have that many dedicated people. It was IT people that were trying to help out with the security. And so whenever there was a project, I just said, hey, I'll do it. Yeah, let me do it.
Yeah.
And so I started doing that. And then, learned a lot that way. And then the very first intrusion detection alerts, it was the IBM intrusion detection system, which back at the early days, the amount of detections that they had was relatively small. I mean, I don't know if they, at the very, very beginning, I don't know if they had more than 100 different signatures or rules to alert on. It was, but that was the early days, So I had to forward those. There was no SIM or SIEM or whatever you want to call it back in those days. And we'd have a thing called a mother of all managers that would manage, oversee the network to monitor everything, to make sure everything was going okay. So we would set up a specific visibility on this mother of all managers just for security. And we would forward the intrusion detection alerts to this particular view. And eventually we had a couple of people dedicated, even 24/7, to start monitoring those, all of the time. Those, it was mainly the security and the intrusion detection. Eventually then you might have a little bit of firewall, but some firewalls weren't that sophisticated back then. But anyway, I want to say that then there was a job opening that came open at Verizon Wireless to start the security monitoring and its response team. And what happened is T-Mobile, Paris Hilton's account got compromised.
Yeah.
And
I remember that.
I remember that. Yeah.
Well, I owe my job, my first job at Verizon Wireless, to Paris Hilton because the C-suite, in their infinite wisdom, said, oh, you know what? We may need some full-time people to start doing this security stuff.
Wow.
And there was probably, I don't know, I know there was over 100 people that applied for the position. But anyways, it took so many interviews, but finally, they decided to hire me, and I was able to start. But it was definitely a bumpy road. The first person that I reported to only stuck around for a month or two and got promoted to a VP position. So I didn't, so there was not much happening at the beginning. I just sort of was trying to figure out what they had and what they didn't have at that period of time. And then I got a second person, and they lasted maybe less than 6 months, but couldn't get a whole lot of budget from them. And then finally a third person came along. And anyway, it was interesting. It was interesting.
Oh.
So
did you ever send Paris Hilton a thank you note for?
No, but I that's a good idea. I should do that. I should do that.
I didn't have it on my bingo card, but we'd be talking about Paris Hilton and cybersecurity today. So
exactly, yeah. So anyway, that was just sort of an interesting little tidbit there. But but I saw a lot of different things happening, and I built one of the first successful SIMs there, ArcSight, and
Yep.
Oh, yep.
yeah. But eventually they moved, to, like a lot of people, moved to Splunk. Splunk at the beginning, when I started ArcSight, Splunk was just a hobbyist, little small time hobbyist thing, for a little smaller, at the best, medium size enterprise. It wasn't really made for a larger enterprise. But then ArcSight, they ended up selling to HP, but they sort of slowed down their development, and they didn't really develop their database properly to be able to handle the workloads of a larger company. And so eventually they moved to Splunk. But anyway, but it was, it helped a lot having once you get a SIM in place, no doubt, when you're dealing with millions of events a day, or actually hundreds of millions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so having been through the fire a few
Yes.
times in your day,
Yes.
and being kind of at the crux of this, the new AI versus AI showdown, botnets,
Right.
and really having been through all of that, how would you describe your leadership philosophy? Especially with high pressure situations, if you're finding something that's absolutely it's critical to you, how would you describe that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times you have to sort of constantly do a continual risk assessment of what's going on. I think people that do a risk assessment, maybe once a year or something, it's just not enough anymore. And I think it's hard. It's been hard. I don't know. I can't say that for every organization, but it's been hard for the C-suite to really grasp the dynamic nature of what's going on in the network. You remember the early NIST. I don't remember some of the early NIST that wasn't, not this, before CSF. Yeah, remember that was more, they're all static controls.
Oh yeah.
And I
I
remember
DoD, so NIST was my bread and butter.
and I just go, wait a minute. You realize we're in an extremely dynamic environment here. Static controls by itself is just not going to hack it. And I was at a conference, and I didn't realize it, but I was standing within earshot of it was the second in charge of NIST at the time, and I was lambasting the early NIST control, saying, how do you expect to deal with all these dynamic threats with all these static controls? I said, NIST has got to get their blank together and come up with a new way of looking at this. And I had 2 or 3 people agree with me. And again, all earshot with, and it's like, and somebody said, Bob, you realize that's the second head of NIST right over there. And I said, well, they probably need to hear this. So anyway, that's I think that's a lot of it, is the dynamic is constantly reassessing what's going on, and being able to have the visibility and context. Those are key things. I bring that up, and I brought it up to people that are VP or C level, and sometimes they just sort of cross, they get glary eye, their eyes glaze over, and going, wait a minute. I said, you should know this type of stuff. Anyway.
So you've kind of talked about senior leadership, but let's look at the other end of the spectrum.
Sure.
How are you and your teams investing in the next generation of security professionals? What advice are you giving folks that want to come in the field or already in the field and looking to move up into those leadership positions?
Sure. Boy, yeah. That's not an easy one. You're definitely going to have to develop your soft skills. And and you hope you connect, you grab the coattails of somebody that has your best interest in place. I've had both on both sides of that, where people were working with me, and then people working against you too. So I think having a good boss, grabbing a hold of a good boss is the most important thing, even more important than having the ideal position that you may want right away. That's a big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's absolutely crucial, is having a good boss that's invested in your growth and your development.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So I know we're coming up on time. So we always end Criticality Live with like a set of core questions.
Okay.
You know, the ones that kind of give our audience those practical, take it with you insights that they can use straight away. So my first question to you, and putting you in the hot seat here, if you could fix one thing about cybersecurity industry overnight, what would it be?
Oh gosh. I think to have that complete visibility and context into your networks.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's a big ask. And now that we have all these AI, LLMs, MCPs, all the other components involved, that is a huge major ask, and people I don't think are ready for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, we don't even get the CIS basics right for inventory 1 and 2, software, hardware. So doing the rest of it.
I agree with that too. I agree with that. I've fought that fight for a long time.
Yeah.
So, kind of taking that and building on it, what's one practice you can do, technical or cultural or a little bit of both, that you wish that organizations would just stop immediately?
Well, boy, wow. I know one of the things that was an issue before at Verizon. Now, wireless it wasn't, because I had a big say-so at the beginning, but there was a sort of a artificial wall between the people that did the network security versus the endpoint data security, and they need to be connected. They need to be totally joined at the hip. Not only those two need to be joined at the hip, but then your business continuity and disaster recovery, they all need to be joined at the hip, working together in perfect harmony, which is an ideal.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely agree. I've seen where the network and endpoint security folks were just absolutely at odds with each other, and that was always a horrible situation.
Yeah, and I've seen it where they would they wouldn't let the network people see the endpoint device, stuff going on, and then vice versa. And it's like, how do you expect to handle these security events if you don't have that full visibility? It's crazy. That's why I came with the whole concept of XDR, and that's what I did in a like I said, in a very manual way, and was working on trying to get it go to the next level. But anyway.
Yep, and you're active. You're all over the industry all the time. So for our listeners who want to follow you or reach out, what's the best way to connect with you?
The best way is probably LinkedIn. I've been on LinkedIn for a while. Anyway, like I said, one time I was offered to be their first advisory board for cyber, but I do have a YouTube channel too. I have the X or Twitter channel. I'm just not as active, or Blue Sky, or even anyway, Mastodon. But LinkedIn is my primary, so people can definitely reach out to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that's a wrap on this episode of Criticality Live. So huge thank you to our guest, Bob Carver, and an even bigger thanks to you for hanging out with us and being a part of our growing community of leaders who are done with the buzzwords and ready for real conversations. If you got value out of today's episode, hit that follow button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and drop us a review here on LinkedIn, Spotify, or on the on-demand YouTube channel. It helps more than you know. So we want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Secure Nation, for powering this conversation. They're helping organizations defend smarter, respond faster, and make cybersecurity something that actually works. So go check them out. All right. This has been Criticality Live, where we cut through the noise and get to what really matters. See you next time. Thank you.